So when you stand up on this stage and you're the first talk of the day and you look into this extraordinary room of faces, it's kind of daunting because some of you have come here with excitement and passion. Some of you have come here with anxiety and fear, and some of you are thinking about how much you need every cup of coffee. My job is to connect with all of it. I'm not going to answer all your questions. I don't have that much time, but I am going to take you on a journey, and I think it's going to be fun and exciting. So, first of all, let me just start by explaining a little bit about who I am. I'm a company founder. I've started 5 companies with my wife, all of them in technology, media, and storytelling. I'm a filmmaker. I was in a couple of Emmys. And, you know, of my 5 companies, one of them got to be very big. We were the largest producer of nonfiction television in New York for a bunch of years. One of the things about the relationship between technology and storytelling and truth is that it bounces back and forth. And in my journey, some of the technology that arrived early, I was lucky enough to see. And part of what I'm hoping some of you will come away from this day is you'll leave here today and go, wait, there's something that I saw that changes either the company I want to build or the job that I want to do or how I raise my family. So we're going to do this in 3 parts, and we're going to move along fairly quickly. And if I lose you along the way, we'll get to the Q&A and I'll try and answer it. If not, I'm just asking afterwards, so I'll have to chat with you with a cup of coffee. So here are the 3 parts. First, the past, present, and future of technology. That last bullet is a little daunting because I'm going to talk about the future in a way that I think is believable. Second, we're going to talk about truth, trust, human judgment in an AI-driven world. By the way, today on this stage, this is the first time I heard somebody put a hard date on the arrival of AGI without any ambiguity. That was exciting. I'm going to scribble out of my calendar because everyone else is kind of leaning toward a date. And then finally, we're going to talk about the speed of change and how we be on the right side of AI. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There's some danger and there's some excitement. And if you're like me and you wake up at 6 in the morning and read all the news alerts that I do per day, literally the talk that I'm giving today, 2 of the slides changed yesterday. So this is not a fixed answer to the question. Okay, so let us jump in. Ready? Here we go. First of all, past, present, and future of technology. Looking around the room, you're all too young, so you won't remember. Early on in my career, I ran a television production company, and somebody showed me a camera. It was called a Sharp View Cam, and it looked like a lunchbox. You held it in your hand, and the lens turned around. And I remember I had relatively short arms, holding it out like this, and doing this, and thinking, this changes how stories are told. There were no iPhones, but it's the app. That camera became something called Viewers News. Viewers News evolved into a series that I sold to MTV. And it went like this. We went on the air, we said, do you have a story to tell? At this point, regular people like us had no way to get on television unless you were arrested. And we put an 800 number on the TV and we said, call us. And the phones went nuts with people saying, yes, I want to tell my story. We had 5 cameras which Shark had loaned us. We FedExed them to the people who called. They recorded their story. They FedExed back the tape, not the camera. We watched the tape. We called them and said, hey, you missed this part you told us about. And we have this interactive relationship with them. Let me answer the question that I get asked every time I tell this story. How many cameras did we lose? 0. I think we probably sent those cameras out 1,000 times because no one wants to steal your camera when they can be on TV. And if they steal your camera, you don't put it on TV. This was before YouTube existed. And I don't take credit for seeing the future as much as I take credit for seeing the power of this camera. And the stories, by the way, they are now on YouTube. I encourage you to Google them. Some of them are quite spectacular. But the relationship between my company and the audience was interactive. We would ask them questions, they would answer. They wouldn't lie, they wouldn't make stories up. We'd fact check them. Mostly they got on the air with those fact checks in place. Where did this take us? And by the way, I want to just say one cautionary thing. And this is part of you. We talked a lot about democratizing media. We were very excited about democratizing media. Nobody in that company sat down and said, what's dangerous about this idea? What might go wrong if everybody can tell every story with no cost and no friction? And in hindsight, I wish we asked that question, because I think the democratizing of media was great, did some great things, and did some things that I would argue is a little terrible. And I take guilty of that. Okay, so jump forward. What that became user-generated video, user-generated views became reality TV. And I'm happy to say that was when I stepped off that particular set. My wife and I talked about it, and we said, wait, we're in the news and documentary business. Is that the same thing as reality TV? And, that word is funny, right? Reality is something. And these shows, while they were cheap to produce and they were entertaining, were not what we did. So reality TV comes along. In New York, we then had a big company, and on 9/11, we used our skills in user-generated video, and we went out and said to New Yorkers who then didn't yet have an iPhone, but had offered VHS camcorders, if you saw 9/11 happen, we want to talk to you. We got 1,000 phone calls, again, asking the audience to participate. That became a film called 7 Days in September. We collected what is now the largest archive of 9/11 video in the world. And about 4 months ago, we donated the entire archive, almost 1,000 hours of video, to the New York Public Library. Not because we know what will come of it in the library, but because we think that having the future have access to this material will tell stories that are very different than the ones that we can tell as people who lived through. So that takes us to this moment in time. And I will argue, and some of you may disagree with me on this, that this is fundamentally different. At the point at which technology can produce video that is indistinguishable from real life, something very powerful and a little scary now. And part of that is Sora 2. Did anyone download and use Sora 2? I'm just curious. One person. We should talk. So Sora 2 was incredibly compelling. As I was out on my book tour, I used Sora 2 to make some testimonial videos from celebrities who I never met. We never read my book. And I had the good sense to never publish them because they were terrifying. Sora 2 lasted about a month. And Sam Altman had the wisdom to take it down. Not because someone else isn't already building it, there's lots of technology like it out there, but because it was probably a bad business decision. So I want to just give you an example of the video, and then we'll talk about it for a second.
We can't believe this is real. Naturally, it's your dog wedding right in the middle of the mall. All right, buddy, let's get out of here. Here we go. This your scene talking. We're like a fuzzy little cloud. He's happy, he's warm, he's high now.
So, does anyone not argue that that's a real miniature donkey? No, it's not a real miniature donkey. That everything about that is created on sort of here. When you say people, what do you think about that? This very interesting thing happens, and this is the moment in time where if you read the comments on that video, they go like this. Is that real? That can't be real. Is that AI? Who cares? It's cute. I like it. And that journey, we've all been down that journey, right? Is that real? I don't know. Maybe it's AI. And if it's a post on the apple, mostly what we get to is, does it really matter whether it's a real miniature donkey or an AI created donkey? If it makes you feel, oh, that's cute. unfortunately, when you take that same journey down, for example, news or public affairs, or information or images coming out of a war zone, really scary things happen to society, which is, wait, if I can't know what to believe, if I don't know what's true, then maybe nothing's true. And if nothing's true, then maybe I just give up. And we're teetering on that moment right now. And I'm hopeful that we'll come away from the edge. We'll talk before the end of this, talk about how we come away from the edge. But I hope everyone enjoyed the introduction. Because that feeling, that human feeling, is real. And, I'll just give you as an example. You're out shopping for clothing, you go into a store, you put on a jacket, and the salesperson says to you, "Oh, it's really good." So now, logically, he's full of shit. His job is to sell you a jacket. He doesn't care what he is to know you. But still, human, being told that looks good on you is better than, I don't know, green or blue. So we are wired to accept that kind of positive input from the fake little spouse. Every time I've seen that video 100 times, and every time the boy goes, "Oh," like it makes me feel good every time. It doesn't make me feel any less good, even though I know it is provably untrue. And that's, as a species, what we're struggling with. It is. Which brings us to truth. As I began to write the books, I began to write the book 5 years ago. And literally, chapter 1 began writing as AI arrived on the scene. And at first, the book wasn't about AI, and then it was a little about AI, and then as I went along writing and studying, it became more about AI. And really, one of the things that you have to come to individually, and I won't give you the end of the book up, except to say, I do come to a conclusion, which is this moment, is truth always up for grabs? Is it always something we've been? When we talk to our friends and we say, the Knicks are the best basketball team in the world, would anyone in this room dare to disagree with me at this moment? I don't. So that being said, truth is either always in dispute, or this moment that AI brings us to puts truth in a very different set of crosshairs. So let's get to part 2. Truth, trust, and human judgment in an AI-driven world. Very good. So I wrote a book. The book took 5 years. I worked with this extraordinary team of people. I got a graduate degree from NYU in the future of truth. That was my thesis. The book came out, and this was the cover of the New York Times. So I just want to share with all of you that my mom would like me to be on the cover of the New York Times. This was not the way she wanted me to. Now, I'm not going to get into the whens and wherefores of the book and its journey. That's a talk for another day, except to say it's really interesting. It's a great story and super relevant to this talk. I would have appreciated not being the subject of said talk. So here's 2 paragraphs I want to read with you, and I'll tell you why. Humans are notoriously bad at distinguishing confidence from accuracy. If a statement is fluid, specific, and presented in a familiar format, we tend to treat it as authoritative. Plausibility is the superpower of modern AI. We're building systems that make fiction indistinguishable from facts, then deploying them at planetary scale. That's the danger we face. It's a nice 2 paragraphs to write, pretty thoughtful, logical. Every word of that was written by ChatGPT. Uh-oh. So I delivered it in my voice. I delivered it in a way that all and that is the problem we face. But how does ChatGPT know that? And does it know that? And is that, essentially us teetering on the edge of AGI? Lots of people would yell at me for saying that. I'm not sure that ChatGPT is there yet. But Sam Altman said rather publicly, or one of the key leaders at OpenAI just the other day, ChatGPT is over. And, I often, as I read words, think, does the comms team know he's saying that? Like, you're about to go full, and you're telling potential investors that the thing they know you for is being replaced by a super app. Someone following that little line of reasons. Okay, so let's get to part three. The speed of change. How can we be on the right side of AI? So one of the things you need to know is that until very recently, 6 months ago, hallucinations, which is a word I don't like it in terms of the description of what the thing is it does, but I haven't been able to find a better one and I respond. But hallucinations used to be described by technologists as a byproduct of a state that they're fixing. And there's a whole history of, in particular, OpenAI planning to fix hallucinations. Two things that happened in the last 6 months. They finally said, we're never going to fix them. They're always going to be hallucinations. And there's now an argument, which I think is really relevant for all of us sitting here today. And that argument is maybe they're actually a feature, not a bug. In the same way that if the clothing salesman said to you, honestly, you could be used to lose a little weight before we sell you a jacket. It might be true. Not going to sell a jacket though. The reason why the current chat engines are charming and defensible and funny and almost never telling you, I can't answer that, or like, I don't know the answer to that, is because giving you a synthetic answer turns out to be a better consumer experience than giving you an honest, factual, science-based answer. That has to do with the business model of how those fight can work. The problem with that, and why I think we should all be worried about that, is increasingly every one of our lives touches AI. I was going to say every day, but that's just so sprinters of scale. It's so rough. Every hour, every minute. And you know, as I get into conversations about the book, people say, well, I don't use AI. Or I have one writer say to me, well, I don't use AI. I'm like, how do you do that? He goes, I have an air-gapped computer I write on. And I'm like, okay. So you literally have, I said, you have a copy of Microsoft Word, which isn't part of Word 360, because you can't use it. He goes, so I have an old copy that I just never. So I admire people that want to live in that little bubble. But realistically, every device you're on has to pull a ring on the device. It's connected to the internet, which is connected to something on it. And that's changing so fast. And in ways that I think we're going to have a fork in the road moment, I'm going to tell you about. So after the article in Times came out, I got a lot of outreach from people who say, some version of that happened to me. Let me tell you my story. And one was a medical researcher at Columbia University. And he said, I have been researching the number of hallucinated misinformation in medical research. And this is the chart he sent me, which essentially says it went from being essentially zero to climbing extraordinarily in the last 4 years. And all of that comes from some number of people using AI for nefarious purposes or to make money. And then AI being used by legitimate researchers, people doing hard work, looking for citations and finding sources and getting it wrong. Now, at the end of the day, whether a book has some mistakes in it or not is not going to impact your lives. It might impact my co-sales. But having your doctor make a medical decision about research that they've gotten from the internet that is provably misinformation is, pardon my language, fucking terrifying. And we should be worried about that. Sidebar story. I went at my general physical about a month ago, and my doctor said, this is me sharing a little bit of personal information. He said, your cholesterol is actually down. We're going to take you off the lipid control. Whatever. I'm no longer disciplined. I got an email yesterday from my doctor saying, please continue taking lipid. Something didn't seem right. I called his office. I said, just got this email from the doctor. She said, that's weird. He's on vacation. I said, where did it come from? She said, oh, AI. I said, here's the instruction from my doctor, signed by my doctor, that gave me my email. Should I follow it? She said, absolutely. And, to connect that to current events, if you watch The Pit, because who doesn't, there's a whole storyline in The Pit about the fact that they're using AI and it's speeding things up and it's making doctors' lives better, except it's occasionally and meaningfully wrong. So I'm pleased to know that indirectly my story is nationally successful television show. So another example. This is the data from that medical report. 4,000 fabricated medical references found in 3,000 biomedical papers. AI-generated errors outing prepared medicine, law, and science. 23% of submitted cancer research abstracts showed probable AI-generating text. What's troubling about this is that everyone knows it, and afterwards you can all tell your particular story of the weird thing that AI's told you about something to be different. We've all had them. And yet, it doesn't stop you from using it because it is so extraordinarily powerful. This is another example. This is Professor Casey Heisler. She's associate professor of information sciences at Colorado Boulder. She's on TikTok talking about AI every day. I find her delightful. She talks about working on a paper, doing the research, finding a citation that she thought was wrong, going to Google, just check her office, going to Google, putting it in, having Google respond with an equally hallucinated citation. So at some point, this check your work thing starts to make you feel like you're standing on quicksand, because we are. Now, is this always going to be the case? When I get to the end of my talk, I'm going to tell you the answer is no. So hold on for that, because there's a happy end. This is also a story that you all read. Judges punish lawyers for using AI for citations. And there's temptation to sit there and read these stories and go, what an idiot. Like, how did he not check that? How did he get bamboozled? But all of a sudden you start to see have had doctors, lawyers, writers. This is the data. In the legal profession now, 75% of lawyers are using AI. So they all read that story. They all said, what an idiot. And then they went back to using AI because they're going to try. They're going to know. But in the same way that person in the store tells you look handsome and a great guy, AI is pretty good at telling you this is a good answer. So it's a story with the New York Times using AI. This is, to me, the data that's most interesting. 82% of journalists are using AI every day. Because of course they are. You're under pressure, your boss wants you to use it, it's moving faster, right? All of you had someone in your company stage we're adopting this, use it, but be careful, or check your work. So this is the one that came out literally the day before yesterday, and they had this graphic. This is KPMG, which is, we're tracking a massive study because they found hallucinations in this carefully researched, highly relevant study that turns out to just be provably irresistible. So here's where I think things start to change. Who owns hallucinations? Who's responsible? Well, it turns out we have a landmark case coming out of Germany that we call, it was when Germany said Google overviews are their words. And while Google is not responsible for the links it delivers to you, when they start writing answers that are provably wrong, they are legally responsible. It's a big deal. Because unless this stays offshore, which I don't believe it will, you're going to see all of the platforms increasingly saying, wait, the things we publish, we can't simply put a little disclaimer at the bottom that says, hey, guess what? We might be wrong sometimes, and that will get us off of it. I think, when I talk to people in the platform world and in the legal world, this case comes up 10 times. So, which brings us to where we are. You may have noticed there was an IPO the other day. Grok was buried in the S1. which is probably where it belongs. But at the end of the day, we have at least 2 more IPOs coming. In the excitement and the enthusiasm, and the market says people want to buy SpaceX. Somebody who I trust who's very smart said to me the other day, I said, "What's the return on investment for SpaceX?" And he said, "Asteroid mind." And I said, "Okay, just for argument's sake, how long is it going to take for us to be the asteroid money?" He said, "About 20 years." So we're going to have quarterly reports from SpaceX that wait 20 years to see the return on that. I mean, I know a little about the market. Some of you know more about market. That's just not from one. So we're going to see some IPOs, and they're all going to be huge. But the question is what, and I think that's where it ends. So we have a few minutes left. We have questions. What comes next? Well, this is exciting. Again, you're going to see pre-IPOs. I think you're going to see increasingly these companies begin to build truth into their models. I think they're going to have to define truth and citations and sources. Which, by the way, when you talk to developers and say, how hard would it be for OpenAI to deliver its synthetic text in italics or in red? Or it knows the difference between what it's source and what it wrote. Well, we can't with it done. So for today's Tuesday, I would recommend that weekend be this coming week. Before my doctor gets bad information about how to treat me. Agentic AI is exciting. We don't have enough time to get into it, except to say it's the thing that's going to connect all these tools very quickly and make all of them miserable, not be able to get software to do what you want to do to solve that. And then this is the place where I promised you a happy ending, and we're going to get there. Imagine if all of these engines take truth into their answers tomorrow. All of a sudden, all of these technologies start to become brand new businesses. A doctor's AI, healthcare AI, a travel AI, all of which said in the same way that Google Maps doesn't often send you off the wrong bridge and into the ocean. So we know how to write technology that gives people proper answers. At the moment, we're not doing that. But I think you're going to see law, education, finance, and health all with brand new products whose names you may know, some of them are due, but I'm not in the investment reputation business. To me, this is thrilling and exciting. And I were placing bets, it would be on much narrower focused tools that solve problems as opposed to great big platforms who view their charm and humor and likability above their accuracy. So, this is a video that I was in. This is Nicholas Thompson and Bengino talking about basically truth-based AI, and he's building a tool called Science. I went looking for the URL, I had trouble finding it, but he's highly recommendable and thoughtful, and this is on YouTube. So, with that, highly recommend the book. Future of Truth. It's a complicated and fun book, and I'm now ready to answer a couple of questions. So we have a person with a mic right there. So, ask pardon. Come on. That's good. You have to make it feet. That did.
Thanks for this. If the opinion is that truth can be built into some of these platforms in a weekend, why are they doing it now? What's the issue?
It's a business model question. They made a decision that they want to be, that both OpenAI and Anthropic in particular are making massive bound to be biggest first. And if you think about how OpenAI appeared in our lives, ChatGPT went from something you never heard of to something everyone was talking about in about 3 weeks. And that acceleration is based on how delightful the experience is. It's not homework. It's not stressful. By the way, so I use it now increasingly when I'm working on software. And when you say to it, hey, I'm trying to get this thing, I'm trying to get this Adobe product to solve a problem for me, it always says, you know what, Steve? They hide the real answer to that. Let me help you find it. then it always makes me feel slightly calmer that I'm not wrong. Adobe's a little tricky that way. And this guy that is so good at answering tech questions about software. I won't ever go to a user menu ever again. So that decision to make it a delightful user experience means, and remember, it wasn't that long ago that the only answers you were getting to those platforms was from the training data. The fact that it now reaches out to the web is a relatively new phenomenon. And it gets answers from Reddit. You could debate whether you think that's a good place to get answers. That internally, I know everyone at these companies internally is struggling with what does truth mean. And it turns out it's actually pretty complex.
You look forward to the opportunity on pushing the years. Couple was to what? So we all you can especially to one on on this topic about the truth is then we kind of create a big topic for people to know about. We go talking about individuals. Of course, the case going to give off themselves as rabbits and big organizations and hyperscalers and everything on keeping that information and inbound the truth into using what documents tell us stuff. I really finds down if colors are not thinking about it for us. We study level one, I think it's question designed as I want going forward. I would really understand the future of that.
Do we have it?
For that.
So let's dispense of politics for a moment. All politicians lie. Democrats, Republicans, Independents. I don't think that any party gets responsibilities that per and people always use propaganda. People always choose, I don't know what your mail is like, but my mail is this deep. Overwhelmed with political flyers, let's stats. I think the question is, and you look at the goat, that's who made you go, who's going to do that? Who's going to cross the line and say, I'm going to literally be this actor on video in which my candidate throws wings on his back and flies in the air. And or there's something more believable than this. And I think we're teetering on the edge of that. And I don't think it happened. It's all been for 2 years so far. Like it's all been in that you have to ask yourself, is this real question? The answer is pretty evident. And I think it wouldn't be hard to make it. Impossible. Yeah. I mean, could I produce a video of the last 6 seconds of the basketball states and then where the ball did make it through and say, look, this is what, if you were in the city, this is what actually happened. Yes. No one would dare that. It's fun to say either. But that's good.
I think that's unique.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I call lunch.
I don't display here like I meant for the actual puzzle about truth to be slightly daunting, but in the end fun, because I really do believe we're going to look back on this. Like I believe that this moment of hallucinations is going to be in the rear view mirror, and I think it's up to us to say to the platforms and to say to our companies, let's not accept that because it's the anxieties and this. So look, demanded.
Please do.
I'm not a technologist, but I think there's a watermark that spans even maker that's out there in imagery. But it's the words that I've thought on. So when you talk about the words for some of the doctors and that information, they create and hallucinations and false research reports. I don't know how maybe imagery you can technologically govern. I don't know about the words. And then the third thing is governance is not a strong suit of these technology companies. So I don't know why in this era of AI, what changes?
It's a great question. So currently, the government has pretty much stayed out of the tech business. And for those of you, let me geek out for 1 second. There were, once for the last 20 years, this kind of firewall called Section 230. And Section 230 essentially protected what was then mostly social media from hating government engagement at all by saying they didn't produce this material, they were responsible for it. You're seeing that begin to change. There were 2 lawsuits that were pretty critical, one in Los Angeles, another in New Mexico. And there's a real deep-seated anxiety in the tech world about whether or not the responsibility for product liability will quickly move over to the platforms. And the same place as it left. And that's why that Google story out of Germany matters. At the end of the day, what we have now is hyper growth with no friction. And for any of you that have ever written a professional paper, not true for peer review, it's the definition of friction. It's slow, it's complicated, it's arduous. Fiction is useful. Fiction slows down visibly. So I don't think we're going to count on government to jump in, but I do think liability is going to arrive and is arriving. I'm not a pro-lawsuit guy. In this case, I am.
Any other questions with the audience?
Hi, thank you. Just on the subject of safety in AI, how do you think about that when it comes to truth? Maybe drawing a line in sand of what model might answer and what it might not.
It's a great question. So, first of all, I am not a fan of the word guardrails. If you play a drinking game in that space I'm in and take a shot every time someone says guardrails, then you would be shit-based. So I think it's relatively meaningless. And I also think you have to look at the amount of money these companies have and realize that politics is influenced by the number of potential lobbyists and dares and here. So I don't see that. That being said, though, I do think, and this is, I guess, why I'm excited by it. Once I teach, this is my secret mission up in it. Once I teach everyone in this room, A, that hallucinations are real, and B, that you don't have to accept them, then the question becomes, when you have a choice between different tools to use, which one is going to be the most explicit about saying, we're going to make every effort to deliver truthful information. And when we don't, we're going to let you know that this is an ambiguous answer because we can't get a factual basis for it. And I think that, if I breathe life into that idea, first of all, they can put that way too. And secondly, all of you being able to say, like right now, you have all these choices, Gemini versus this versus that. You're like, I don't know, are they all the same? And at the moment, they all kind of are the same, but not for much longer. So whichever one of those companies raises their hand and says, we're going to lean into truth, they get $20 a month. Here's the other thing to be aware of. All of us who remember the journey of Uber, when Uber arrived in New York, they had that same giddy delight. Like, oh my God, I could get a car to come take me out. That's why I'm going to drive me to the bar and let the people at for 8 hours. There was not the love about it, $8 from Upper West Side to downtown. Well, that same ride is now $57, which I think is insane. Good. But back you can pay $20 and get, the premium version of all that. Know that that's going to become $250. That's certainly as quickly as they can think that what they're now basically using invested dollars to build those massive, unbelievable, no idea that thing. Data centers. Once it becomes $250 a month, as opposed to $20 a month, you're going to see very different product differentiations in that ones.
Great. For the next question, you see anything, you see something that can, that would make or break where this, that will fire out, but okay, we cross the Rubicon, we are exploding, we have to start rating it, was in special, times, is there anything, and this on that's good enough, one year in wrote.
I guess I don't. And part of that is just, if you read the S1 for SpaceX and looked at, I mean, I had 8 or 10 of my closest 50 or fiscal conservative friends publish great big articles about IPOs and say, do not buy these shares. These are here are the reasons why that is not an investable stock. And despite that, the market's yelling up there. Because it's Elon, it's a fund, and then it's saying that much money, and it reminded me, I'm not saying this out that big, I shouldn't. It reminded me of GameStop.
Which had the content.
Like nobody believes GameStop is a product. Nobody on there. And yeah, it was kind of fun. It was that much money, and you were in it. Like at the end of the day, I don't want to go to Mars. I don't want kids to go to Mars. I don't want you to go to Mars.
They actually
Go to Mars.
absolutely,
I think it's this barren. Don't forget right now, but Chris. I mean, you're younger than I. Just make you live months. I'm pretty sure. By the way, I told someone earlier. I've been the only person in this room that actually can tell you certainly what it's like to live without gravity, because I've flown in the subsonic anti-gravity plane known as the Bombic. Living without gravity, quite awesome. So that part of Mars.
we have time for one last question. We lost the space graphic
On the point of truth, is there on the point of truth, is there a point where we go too far with the untruths, and so the models won't know the difference between truth and untruth? Like your Google reference before, right? The referencing a research paper, and then you go to Google, and Google gives you bad reference. At what point do we get too much untruths that we don't know the difference between the two?
So this is the question that the platform you focus internally are struggling. Yeah, because it's easy to say kind of collect up way conversation. Just use trusted sources. Well, and you're this big of the year, that big of the year, the National Science Foundation. At the end of the day, let's separate out two things: subjective truth and objective truth, because one is way easier than the other. 1 + 1 = 2, not in the debate, right? So this room is the right temperature. Depends on how you adopt your So I think if I get it right, truth is going to be in insightful conversation about where AI goes, and they're going to have to not only answer your questions truthfully, but be really explicit about where they came to that truth. So if the answer is simply the most number of people now are taking movement says that New York is the #1 destination on the planet, that's a bad answer. Because the training data is Reddit and all kinds of noisy stuff. But I think it's going to be much less tough to it. I don't think there's going to be an easy. But thank you for asking that as a closing question, because I'd love to be able to step off stage having been the person that tried to answer. Thank you all very much. It was really funny.
I said, watching it,